Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. All right. Thank you, Mr. Producer. We are back. This gentleman with me is Timothy Grossman. Timothy, welcome back to the program.
So great to be back. Thank you for having me, Casey.
Well, I was just saying you're a real interesting guy. You came up with and created a source of wellness. Can you tell people, can you reiterate what a source of wellness is?
Yeah, well, Source of Wellness is a holistic health company, and we work and collaborate with other holistic practitioners. But what we do is primarily around Reiki, around mindfulness. Those two have a close relationship just within their inception, and then also we do healing sound, which is like it's taking off in the medical community. That there's a relationship between sound and how it affects the central nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, well, the whole autonomic nervous system. So we are looking at those types of things to help people come into that alpha state, that sort of state of awareness. And necessarily when you work in, say if you do yoga or you do Qigong, you're working with your own personal energy, and which is great. We need to cultivate that, right? But as you work with Reiki, you're kind of pulling in a type of the essence that is well beyond us, right? And what I mean by that is that it comes from like an infinite source. It's like the feeling we get when we're singing, or the feeling we get when we're completely in love with something we're doing, and it just raises that by a lot, 3 or 4 standard deviations. And so then it creates a container for mindfulness to be more effective, for, other things that you're doing in life to be more effective. And since it's kind of the essence of who we are, it's just called something that originated from a Japanese practice. It's very healing. So I guess I could touch off with, so we do Reiki, we do mindfulness, we kind of create the close collaboration between the two. We do that as we offer sessions for people. My wife does healing sound and sound baths, and I will lead a meditation, and then we'll also bring Reiki into that meditation for people. And then they get to experience that in a group setting. Sometimes people just want to come to them, a gentleman and his wife, or wife and gentleman, or any couples, as a matter of fact. So it works individually, it works in groups, and people walk away with something, and they might not be able to put their finger on exactly what it is, but it's a great feeling, and you take that with you. And as you continue to cultivate that, it brings presence into your life.
Wow. Hey, Timothy, is there anything that you need to do before you get involved with a session? Like I've heard the term clearing your chakras or balancing. Is that something that you do in a session, before a session or something? Can you explain to me what that is?
Oh, yeah. Well, so in the Japanese system as it originated, because I studied both the Western and the Eastern philosophy, and I continue to study the Eastern philosophy because this is the progenitor to modern day Western styles of Reiki. In the Japanese system, as it's taught even by the Gakkai now, which means society in Japan, the Japanese thought of the body was that it starts with the hara, which is kind of down around the navel, and then the forehead, and then the heart. And so if you then kind of superimpose the idea of the hara, the forehead, the heart, and then you look at the Indian system of the chakras from the yogic system, there's 3 in the Japanese, there's 7 chakras understood within the yogic system. And then, of course, we've kind of sometimes taken that and kind of overlaid it. Now, if you look at the bioenergetics, if you look at how they're looking at the human biofield, and every one of us emit light. We don't see it as weak, photon light, but we emit that. Then you're looking at the science perspective of the torus field. So there's an overlap of what we're understanding from ancient doctrines or understandings to current medicine, but specifically regarding chakras. If you understand that the chakra system is a system that helps regulate awareness from the yogic standpoint, or the hara, which is within the belly and then the heart and then the forehead in the Japanese system, what we're really doing is we're creating presence, and we're letting go of the ego, and we're moving that to the side, and we're just allowing ourselves to fall into the breath, fall into that natural state. As you do this, and this is why being a competent practitioner is important, it's not about something that we are doing to someone else. As practitioners or even teachers, what we're holding space for is for that exchange to take place. It's like when I see you, I see no difference between you and me. I see an amazing human being. I might not know your backstory or your history or all of the ins and outs of your life, but you're just as a divine point of light as myself, is how we see our children. And if you think about that relationally, our kids can do no wrong, you know. But if we look at each other with that same grace, is, yep, you might not like the behavior, but at the crux of that individual, the very core of that person is someone who wants to be seen, heard, understood, and acknowledged. And that's a basic human concept. So before, each day I wake up and I recite these certain precepts. And the first precept is, just for today, I will not be angry. Which means when we indulge in anger, right? We shut off the ability, indulge, right? We indulge in anger. We shut off the ability for ourselves to see, other people as, or situations or things for what they really are. It clouds our judgment. So it's a discipline. And just for today, the second precept, we will not worry. What does worrying do for anyone?
Yeah, it causes more worry.
Religiously oriented, and they're like, well, I put it in God's hands. Cool, that's great. But if you put it in God's hands when it's something good that happens, you need to do the same thing if it's something that you're not so happy about in life. If you don't worry about it, it creates space. I'm not saying not be concerned about creating full momentum, but the uselessness of the hamster wheel of worrying, that's what we're trying to move away from.
It's a great term. That's it puts the picture. Yeah. And
then the third precept is be grateful. Just for today, I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to be grateful. In the military, I was grateful if I got to scarf down half a cold MRE in the middle of a cold field problem with rain and mud and just being miserable. Well, we were all miserable together, so that created a bond. But you can be grateful walking in the rain. At least you can take any crappy situation in traffic and just be grateful for the fact that you're able to witness that moment. And these are these 5 precepts are what practitioners learn and then become to embody. And the fourth one is, just for today, I will be diligent in my work, in my presence, honesty, integrity. Those values that that allow you to show up in the world as authentically as possible. Whatever you're doing, what Thich Nhat Hanh said, if you're washing dishes and you're worried about everything else, then you're not mindfully washing the dish. You're not being present to do that one thing. It doesn't matter how mundane it is. Sweeping, changing a diaper, just be in that space. And I'm not saying you always get it right the first time, but there's a likelihood that you're not going to make stupid mistakes because you're present. So just be diligent. And then, I think the most important one is being kind to all things, especially yourself. So as a student, you learn these 5 precepts. These were the precepts by the progenitor of modern day Reiki. His name was Mikao Usui Sensei. He was not a doctor, but he came from, I think it's amazing. He came from a samurai lineage.
Wow.
And then he was a Tendai Buddhist monk, and he studied all although he was privileged, he studied the inner workings of the mind. And in Zen concept, nothing exists without the mind. Nothing outside the mind is real, which means we put a lens of our perception on everything. And if you hold that back and you're not angry, you don't worry, you are grateful, you're diligent in your work, and you're kind to all things, those lenses of perception that create suffering begin to dissipate. What we hold on to so tightly is what we suffer from. Think of a relationship you've been in that was not healthy for you. Well, you were afraid to be without it, even though you're getting the crap beat out of you with it. It creates suffering,
yes.
And it can be anything. It can be holding on too tightly to, things that we think bring us joy, like money. I mean, how many people are afraid to spend $5 because, I'm not saying, and some people don't have that, but some of the poorest people in the world I found are the happiest, because happiness doesn't come from everything around you. It comes from within.
Great point.
So those precepts, first and foremost, are the starting point of my day, and the starting point of I believe anyone can use these, but especially as a Reiki practitioner and teacher. And then, clearing, right? It's just a matter of becoming quiet, settling the mind, settling the fluctuations of the mind. You can't keep the mind, you can't stop the mind. It's not like you're doing something to it, but you're allowing the breath to come in, following that. Instead of the thinking mind, which is like that hamster wheel again, you're moving down into awareness, right? It's at that point then that you can hold space. Now, there's Japanese techniques of meditation, and if we overlay them on current philosophies of mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's all one and the same. It doesn't matter the name you put on it. It's the same thing you're doing. And so as you work with a client in a treatment session, and even students in a training environment, you're not looking at that as that you're doing something to somebody else, or that you're creating some change in their life, or that you're intending anything at all for them except exactly what they need. And I said this recently, and you'll hear therapists say the same thing. You're the expert on your own life. You're the expert on your own experience. Yeah. So totally. For me to have this egoistic concept that I'm doing something to heal you is kind of the not the correct way to think. If I say I'm holding space for this this practice of Reiki to allow you to unfold into your best self, and at the speed in which you're able, which you're willing, that's what Reiki does. Now, how does it work? So many studies have been done, and I can't tell you that I have the exact breakdown of how the practice of Reiki works. What I can tell you is the end result is that people feel better. They says, wow, I'm feeling sensations in the body. They may call it energy. They may say, my consciousness has shifted during this session. I was worried about this one thing, or I've been worried about this cluster of things, and I got some clarity within that space. Physical pain is alleviated to some degree, and so as we look at the studies, what we see is that it helps on the mind, it helps on the body, it helps on what we might call the soul and spirit level, or the consciousness level. And so when all those things come into alignment, we show off the best that we can in the world. Our bodies function better. I mean, I deal with chronic pain. That's the other thing. I get migraines. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me over the years. Yeah. Oh my God. But it's not, it is, from the neck down, I've got osteo conditions. But I find that when I focus on my practice, the ability to work through those acute symptoms and just of being, oh, wow, that's interesting. That really hurts. But it's just the body responding to a stimuli, to muscle tissue that's bound up and protecting and inflamed, or, it's the impact of the cold on the joints that are arthritic, or, I used to have terrible IBS, which is mostly cleared up. But if I get angry, if I get upset, if I get wrapped around the axle, which we can all do, there's no, then all that comes back. then the migraines come back, and everything. So it's almost integral that I work to stay in a space of presence if I want my body to function properly, because it's been racked.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a piece of it.
Okay.
So yeah, we can talk about clearing the chakras. And it's not a Japanese form, but there are Western forms of Reiki that speak to that. And it's all one and the same thing. We're consciousness inhabiting a body, having this very dense human experience. And so within that, all these things come up in the world. You can't meditate your way out of not grieving for a loved one who you lost, your mom or your kid. You just can't. You have to feel and show up for that. If you get angry, if you're bypassing those things, if you're bypassing sadness, if you're bypassing normal human, this normal spectrum of human emotions, you're not doing yourself any favors. So I guess what I'm saying, can you still hear me?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is, yes, there is a clearing process, but it's really a process of becoming present. And we can assign meaning to that through moving through the chakra field. Part of my meditation training, a lot of it had to do with the yoga philosophy. So I get it. But at the very core of it, it's becoming present. It's generating within the body an awareness, and that expansion of awareness allows you to meet the other individual, not as separate from you, but as inextricably intertwined. We're all interconnected. We think we're separate because you look different from me, because, maybe she's a female and I'm a male, or maybe, all these different labels that we assign to each other and assign to things, assign to society. But at the end of the day, the rain doesn't believe it's the ocean. But where does it come from, right? The droplets of the water on the ocean flying through the air, scared as hell that they're never going to make it back to the ocean, still return to the ocean. Everything is literally, we're all coming from and back to the same thing after we've finished our 80 years here, figuring out what we're here to do and what makes us passionate, right?
Yeah.
So,
well said. Well said. It was that meditation that first got you into this, that calmed you down, because you're such a calculated and you calm. Is that what mindfulness is? Is that like, when you're able to talk about that, an idea like you just did, and to educate us on everything that we just heard, is that being in the moment? Is that what you mean by being mindful?
Yes. Mindful is being just in the moment, being aware, being fully present for what you're doing. And there are different states of meditation, but let's just begin with the idea that if you check in with yourself 5 minutes a day, okay, you get done with a marathon of these interviews, Casey, you're doing all these other things and you're like, and somebody spills their coffee on your notebook, right? Or something else happens, or traffic, it is New York over there. So there's something that just recently happened in New York that was terrible. But I'm saying that in that mindfulness space, you become just present and in the moment and fully engaged, rather than looking at the watch, rather than staring at the phone, rather than worrying about what's for dinner, rather than worrying if your kid made it, what they're doing in school that day, and if they're making the grades. Just be present. And we can be present in the moment. We can check in with ourselves. If we begin to follow the breath and allow the following of that breath is amazing. Breath work is like the cornerstone of mindfulness. Because if you settle into the breath and you notice at the top of your breath, just do this. You breathe in, and at the top of your breath, what do you feel? What do you see? What is there? What is there at the very top?
Like a fullness?
Yeah, fullness. And then as you exhale at the bottom of the breath, what is there?
A release.
Yeah. And when we're breathing, right, we are cycling this oxygen we need for the body, but it's more than that. If we're paying attention to that, we begin to notice that at the bottom of the breath, there is a silence.
Ah, okay.
And at the top of the breath, there's a silence. And if you just look at that one thing, that silent space, there's nothing there but your own awareness.
Oh, that's interesting.
So then as you begin to follow the breath and you check in, right, with yourself, you're like, okay, what is it I'm feeling in my chest? Is it contentedness? Is it joy? Is there anxiety or restriction? You just begin to check in. You can move your awareness throughout your whole body. You can move it to the left shoulder. You can move it to the right shoulder. You can move it down into the gut. And you just check in, and you don't tell yourself stories as you're following your breath. Don't tell yourself stories about what it is you're feeling. Oh, that's because I ate lasagna or I had a spicy pizza. Don't, just check in and just see what it is, And the way I do this is that there are people with trauma that feeling anything below the neck is scary. Checking in with the self is scary. And that's also why I think Reiki is so beautiful as a container, because again, as we do certain types of martial arts, or we do certain types of practices, as we do certain type of even breath work, we are cultivating our own chi or prana or ki in Japanese. There's 39 different types of ki in Japan.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in other cultures, there's which is energy, right? Which is,
yeah.
So what we're doing then, getting back to what I was saying, is that we are not using our own ki or chi or prana. We are, as a matter of fact, pulling in the abundant energy of, maybe you'll call it the universe, maybe you'll call it quantum energy, maybe you'll call it what you see, God or the creator, whether it's the Blessed Mother Mary or Jesus or Ganesh, it doesn't matter. You're pulling that in, and that's also consciousness. And if you look at the double slit test, I love this test, where it was they were firing particles like protons, and when you looked at it, they landed on the back of the slit test in a certain type of uniform form. When the scientists weren't looking at it, they were scattered. So consciousness affects even the most minute particles. Just being aware and paying attention to it affects minute particles. So then if you think, okay, well, if Reiki is at its, as it's defined as transcendent or sacred or spiritual, and ki is life force energy, or, they use the rice pot in the Japanese kanji. So it's literally like what sustains us. So within the kanji, you have what's above, you have the three, they look like buckets or something in the middle of it, but what they are is this mind, body, soul. That's the human being. Below it is the earth, so we're the intermediary. And then ki is life force energy. I know that's kind of like a abstract concept, but as you use Reiki to work with mindfulness, those things that come up that are traumatic to you, those things that come up that you want to work with but don't know how. And of course, there's places for this in traditional medicine to do that. But when we're working on ourselves as a practice, when we're trying to become better leaders or better people, better fathers, better grandfathers, better in our relationships, that transcendent energy that's all around us, that comes from whatever belief system we assign it to, or none at all, it's still there. That begins to move into the body, into the awareness, into the person's field, whether you call it in the, newer quantum spaces as the torus field, the heart-brain coherence that Heart Math Institute talks about, whether you call it the chakra system of the Indian space in the yogic tradition, whether you call it the three diamonds, which is Japanese, you're bringing that into your space. And so we are amazing beings of consciousness, but bringing in a higher energetic level of consciousness into our space that we can harness, use, and it's our birthright, as a matter of fact, helps the lived experience become a little bit more clear, if that makes any sense.
Wow. So interesting the way you explain this. Mr. Producer, I don't have time for questions? No? I got to wrap? Okay. Well, Timothy Grossman, everybody. What an awesome guest. Timothy, we're at the end of our show here, but if you could please tell us how to get a hold of you. And I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody who wrote in. Excuse me. But Timothy, please, let me give you the last word here, and then let us know how to get a hold of you. Real interesting stuff, man. You're a great guest.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's, you can reach me at asourceofwellness.com. You can certainly reach me at info@asourceofwellness.com. You can text me at 859-202-1771. Reach out to me that way. And if you're interested in what I do, subscribe. I have updates coming out, and definitely the offerings are both online and in person. So if you're in our catchment area, great. If you are interested in any level of mindfulness coaching or Reiki classes, reach out and I'll be more than happy to set something up.
Awesome. All right, man. Can't wait to hear what you have to say next. Guys, that's Timothy Grossman, and we'll be right back. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.